Fans aren't evil, and here's why.
In this world that you yourself have made, the complexities that exist mostly, it seems to me, outside the creatures of the world. There is an absolute evil and there is an idea of absolute good. Would you agree? Mordor, after all, is a principle of absolute evil.
You don't believe in absolute evil, but you believe in absolute good.
Stories, practically always, a human story is practically always about one thing, aren't they? Death. The inevitability of death.
So Tolkien fans are morally conscious. Tolkien fans have a good sense of right from wrong. That's what I'm discussing. I'm going to discuss it in many different ways, but that's the main point.
I don't know whether you would agree with that, but anyway, that is what, there was a quotation from Simon Beauvoir that I read in the paper the other day, which seems to me put it in a nutshell. I think I'll read it. There is no such thing as a natural death. Nothing that happens to man is unnatural.
So years ago, I had some people ask me to go long and try to do some stuff that was more, I guess, in keeping with the spirit of Tolkien, and that's what I endeavored to do here. So it's neither good nor bad, but really, I hope you appreciate this and enjoy this. Minimal edits have been done, bunch of mini essays, mostly focused on just the breadth and width of the experience of being immersed in different facets of Tolkien's worlds, with a lot of content from Tolkien himself.
Jeff asks, you've been called the American Tolkien. How do you feel that that's a fair comparison?
I'm feeling a strange sense of deja vu.
Yeah, I wonder if it's the same guy we just talked to.
I'm very flattered to be called the American Tolkien. It's the greatest compliment you can give any fantasy writer. Tolkien essentially created modern fantasy. Fantasy, of course, had existed before Tolkien. It goes all the way back to, Gilgamesh and Homer. But modern fantasy, in the shape that we're familiar with it on the newsstands today, is all following in the footsteps of Tolkien.
Are you a Tolkienist or a ringer? So this is from a forum from 2014, which is like ancient days. But what they say here is a Tolkienist is an individual who studies and is a fan of the works of J.R.R. Tolkien. And a ringer is an ardent reader of The Lord of Rings, or The Lord of the Rings, but more specifically, a fan of the films. So which one are you? So I wanted to really, with what I'm doing here, kind of expand the conversation. So are you a Tolkienist or are you a ringer? Which one is more important to you? Is it just like all the works? Did you, for example, did you go to sleep as a child listening to Tolkien? Did you have The Lord of the Rings like playing in the background as you snored? What were you? So I'm going to continue to read a little bit more from this forum post. A few days ago, I came across a post on an online forum, and this is formed by somebody named James Moffat, and it's exactly from a blog from the Tolkien Society. A few days ago, I came across a post on an online forum with reference to my blog. The user kindly linked a Tolkienist perspective to the post under the heading, "Very interesting Tolkien blogs." However, the user also went on to say about the blog, "I think it's a bit of a stretch to call yourself a Tolkienist when you're so enthusiastic about the films? The gentleman, Mr. Moffat, continued to say, I have nothing against this individual whatsoever. I'm thankful he or she posted the link to this blog. I also think there's nothing wrong with what was written. However, what confuses me is why does someone have to be either a Tolkienist or a fan of the films? Why can't they be both? I admit that it is thanks to Peter Jackson's adaptation of The Lord of the Rings that I am here right now writing this post. Without seeing The Fellowship of the Ring back in 2001, I would have never picked up the book, let alone a set of Tolkien books filled with thousands of pages of material, strange names, and unimaginably complex storylines. It is perfectly possible to be able to separate the books from their adaptation, or rather their adaptations. I am both a film fan in general and an ardent reader.
Fact, for instance, that a lot of kings and obviously the hereditary principle is a strong thing, and so on. But
well, let's be plain.
Yeah.
For instance, in this particular
Yes.
world that you have invented, the hereditary principle is very strong,
yes,
though not ubiquitous. The hobbits don't have one,
no,
don't they?
quite so. No.
But do you yourself look back on a world in which the hereditary principle is strong with affection?
I do, yes, obviously. But Shawshank is also very much easier one, very much. Well, I find it very much easier to one in which out of which to make a story.
And you're only concerned with making a story?
Which was my primary concern, which I started out with.
And you took 14 years to make the story.
Quite so, yes.
And this was a story...
So let's think about that. He took 14 years to write The Hobbit. Why did he take 14 years to write The Hobbit? Was he very deliberate in doing so? Is he talking about The Hobbit? And if we think about that, and we come from that place that some might say that perfectionism is really bad, or some might say, well, I wrote something once or twice, so let me just spit it out. Imagine mulling over and going over something over and over and over and over again to the point of near perfection, and then being like, there's still something missing.
That is partly out of the fact that I'm a meticulous sort of bloke. And that I took 14 years, not for the general things it is now, but refining time schemes and getting everything right and so on.
So when you realize that he was so meticulous about time schemes because he didn't want to, which can easily happen when you write something like fantasy, whether it's high fantasy or low fantasy, you can easily get caught up and have the world building dominate the story and have no story. If you have something so immersive as the universe created in Middle Earth, then you want to get the time frames right. You want to get the time frames right because you want people to be lost in the story and be carried away.
Well, for instance, this whole matter of the appendices, 100 pages, language, social customs, history. Normally, if you had been writing a history as a historian, all these would have existed on a card index before you ever began to write.
Yeah.
Is this true for The
Very
Lord of
much
the
so,
Rings?
yes. One thing that, for instance, in the remarks you made at the beginning was the fact that time passed and the hobbits grew into this world. As a matter of fact, what really happened was that because having already constructed the world, they became drawn into it.
The world was constructed like a model aeroplane.
No, but it existed in posse and in a large scale plan before The Hobbit was written. The Hobbit was in fact originally an attempt to write something outside it and grew into it.
So he was so meticulous that he created a world in the languages, and then he created The Hobbit, and then created the other books. Like, to me, that's really a shot of genius in terms of writing. And I'm not just saying that to Stan, even though I am a Stan. I'm just saying that like if you create a world and spend that amount of time on it, then it would lend itself that when we create things out of that world, we would want to be, in some respects, as meticulous or try to be closer in our articulation of the original copy or the universe as the maker himself.
Marking school examinations in the summertime is an enormous, very laborious, and unfortunately also boring. And I remember picking up a paper and actually I nearly gave an extra mark for it, extra 5 marks actually. There was one page on this particular paper was left blank. Glorious. Nothing to read. So I scribbled on it, I can't think why. In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit. I think that was eventually published in 1937.
Take their wheels and leave them. Take their wheels and leave them.
You know, Malva, just once.
So I just double checked, and I think the last time that I went through this, that essentially there were, up until now, 150 million books of all of Tolkien's books sold. But we have to look at also, for example, one of the main countries where Tolkien's books are still very popular is India, which is one of the 2 most populous countries in the world. So when we look at it like that, we could say that potentially the population or the demographics of Tolkien fans, and I'm just riffing off what I searched before, let's say between 50 million to 200 million. I'm just making that figure up. But when we just use those play numbers, we're dealing with many very, very different people. So when we're going to the idea, or we're coming from the point of like Tolkien fans are X, we're really involving very disparate people who are from different countries, and what they have in common is their love for Professor Tolkien's work.
If you don't believe in absolute evil, why did you create the Dark Lord, who seems to be the apotheosis of it?
But he said in the book that he himself was not evil to begin with.
Ah, he fell. Then, like Lucifer.
Yeah.
So you're...
Well, he's several stages down from Lucifer.
You do...
So let's move on and let's take a look at the word evil. So the etymology of the word evil, we go back to Old English, Yfel, Y-F-E-L. Then we go back to roots with a comparable word in Dutch. But essentially, we're going to go all the way back to a German word, which is Übel. Okay, so, and then the context, if I simplify it, is not good. So the premise of not good with a swath of people, going back to my make-believe numbers, 50 million low end, and we're talking about globally, 200 million high end, and we're talking about globally. Okay. And this would be based on really ideas or impressions that these people have about maybe modern interpretations of Tolkien's work. So I'm just going to continue riffing and just on really the basics of the really my premise, which is that Tolkien fans are either good or Tolkien fans are just like everybody else, and neither good nor bad. They're just like everybody else, really. Because the idea that, and let's speed it up to a certain extent, that I don't like a particular work. Now, if we really look at it, let's say I don't like the Jackson movies. Many people love the Jackson movies. Many people are really, really in love with the Jackson movies. But if I don't like the Jackson movies because I like the prose better, That's my preference. That really has nothing to do with my character. That really doesn't shape what kind of man I am. That just simply informs you that the Hollywood interpretations of certain, basically, the Hollywood interpretations of 3 of Tolkien's books, or really like 1 of Tolkien's books split up in 3, however I want to frame it, that I don't enjoy that. Now, for example, there is a trilogy I can definitely say that I'm not really crazy about. The Hobbit, I missed it. I missed it on purpose. Maybe I saw a little bit of it. I think it was one of those things, I saw everything once and never ever saw them again. Not a fan whatsoever of those movies.
General terms, what does the family think of the adaptations of Lord of the Rings? And then I don't know if you've seen any of The Hobbit yet.
No, I can't tell you what happens in The Hobbit, unfortunately. I know that would be good. I don't really know about the family, but I know what I thought. I kind of liked the first one, but I think the thing with films is that they kind of have to exist in their own right. And my problem with the films was really that I think Jackson was kind of too faithful to the book. He kind of put too much into it, and so there was too much going on. I would have liked more character and perhaps following his own course. So I think with the Hobbit films, it's going to be quite interesting because it's the opposite problem, which is that there's a great deal less material for him to work with to put together a trilogy.
Over 3 films again,
yeah,
isn't he?
it's another trilogy. So, he can actually kind of make up his own script.
So the first article I want to look at is Rings of Power Season 2 showrunners ignored fan feedback. And this is from Cosmic Book News. So, despite 67% of fans dropping out before finishing season 1, showrunners of The Rings of Power are pressing on without addressing fan concerns. So, why is that? So, some of what came up during season 1 is that they perceived many of the judgments against them that this was based on the quote-unquote maleficent nature of the fan base, or the toxic nature of the fan base. This wasn't based on poor writing. But just the stats I just mentioned would lend itself to be that is a problem based on poor writing. So why was the show on Rotten Tomatoes for season 1 38%? It was 38% because most people checked out the first episode, if they did at all, maybe the second episode, and then checked out. That's what happened. Most people checked out. And a lot of the people that maybe the article is intimating were viewed at one point in a maybe deleterious light, or were kind of viewed some type of way by Payne and company at Amazon, those were a small minority. Like, most people really into Tolkien just tapped out after maybe episode 1, if they watched it at all. So here's a quote from the article. Much of season 2 was written before the release of season 1. So we've got a plan and we're sticking to it. Patrick McKay filled in GQ. We read everything, and it's impossible not to want to listen and not to want to engage with people. And if people like the show, that can feel pretty good sometimes. But at the end of the day, we're making the show that we believe in. J.D. Payne agreed with his co-showrunner. Yeah, Payne said, and if they don't like the show, then, sometimes people are... He pauses for a moment, discarding the sentence. It's interesting to see what people have to say. We've been working on this for a long time. We've got a plan, and Tolkien had a plan. We're excited to see it all the way through. So, when I hear really what the showrunners said, I do believe that they probably wrote most of what was in season 2 before, season 1 came out. That I believe. But I don't know that I really believe that they didn't tweak, because like really what you see in the different trailers of the Rings of Power, this has been adjusted. They put in way more action. I don't believe the story that they already had that level of action. No. They did definitely tweak what they were doing based on the reactions from season 1. There's no way. I don't believe that. It's not logical and it's not really truthful. So I'm not really sure why they would say, oh, we didn't, or even why would they intimate that they made no tweaks. Maybe they're doing that to sort of misdirect, but I don't believe that. It's very obvious, even with the trailers, that they did something quite different. So I heard, for example, that they're going to add to next season, or really this current season, supposedly an LGBT character, which, let's just think about that. Was that present in Tolkien's literature? It's just a yes or no. It's not really about what your preference is. Was that present in Tolkien's literature? It's just a yes or no. And in addition, more important than that, of course, they're going to be hinting about some kind of romance between Galadriel and essentially, let's get it right, a demon, a devil, Sauron.
In this world that you yourself have made, the complexities that exist mostly, it seems to me, outside the creatures of the world. There is an absolute evil and there is an idea of absolute good. Would you agree? Mordor, after all, is a principle of absolute evil.
I don't believe in absolute evil, but I do believe in absolute good.
If you don't believe in absolute evil, why did you create the Dark Lord, who seems to be the apotheosis of it?
But he said in the book that he himself was not evil to begin with.
Ah, he fell. Then, like Lucifer.
Yeah.
So you're...
Well, he's several stages down from Lucifer. He's several stages down from Lucifer.
So one of the main complaints, for example, regarding season 1 of The Rings of Power really was the Harfoots. And what was wrong with the Harfoots? What was wrong with the Harfoots is that originally, when we think about the context of Tolkien's work, we're not going to stay too deep on The Hobbit, but his first real hit, 1935, The Hobbit, it's about decent, common folk who have a certain morality, and this group of people are called the Hobbits. What we're introduced to in the Rings of Power is some quote-unquote proto-hobbits that have the kindness of a serial killer, which is not something that is really sort of connected to our vision of what a hobbit is. And a Harfoot is a type of hobbit.
But we Harfoots are free from the worries of the wide world. Nobody goes off trail and nobody walks alone. We have each other. We're safe. That is how we survive.
Nobody goes off trail. Nobody walks alone. That's right.
A quick postscript. The Hobbit was actually published in 1937.
Take their wheels and leave them. Take their wheels and leave them.
So if you made it this far, give us a like, subscribe, and I'm out. If you made it this far, here's your bonus part of the video.
Welcome back to the comment section. I'm Brett Cooper. So guys, I hate to be the bearer of bad news.
So she's going to talk about a bunch of different political stuff. If that really triggers you, no hard feelings, click off now.
Tell you this, but according to MSNBC host Rachel Maddow and many other thought leaders and journalists, if you like Lord of the Rings, you could be a dangerous alt-writer.
Considering how extensive the fandom is, how big the fandom is, how international the fandom is, the actual, if you really look at it on the scope that I've analyzed in the previous parts of this video, it's ludicrous. Now, If you are far right, so be it. If you're far left, so be it. That's not the point of what I'm saying. I'm not really going to go there with my commentary.
Oh, wait, you're serious? Let me laugh even harder.
Yep, you heard that correctly. In fact, guys, the right wing has corrupted Lord of the Rings to use to their advantage, allegedly, according to the left-wing media.
This coming season, many people will be triggered for good or for ill. So, for example, they're introducing, as I said earlier, an LGBT character, and then they're going to continue this adulterous, really, relationship between a demon and Galadriel. Now, the core issue outside of politics is really black or white. Is this in the literature? That's just really what it is. It really doesn't matter whether I'm left wing or right wing. Is this in Tolkien's literature? Is this really something that he introduced and put to the forefront of his literature? I think easily most people can answer that with a yes or a no.
I mean, this is just a perfect example of how higher education has failed our entire society, because did everyone suddenly forget that literature is subjective?
I don't really know if there's been a lot of critical thinking happening, and I don't know the exact time that this happened. There are books like The Closing of the American Mind, as an example. There are a lot of things we can look at when we look at the school system. We can look at higher ed, lower ed. We can look at pretty much how society creates people or breeds people in quotation marks to really just serve functions and not think for themselves. Potentially, if we had more people thinking for themselves, we'd have quite a different society, and we wouldn't have a society where people were just like, it's this way or it's that way. We'd have probably more of a society in the middle with varieties of thought and more people being individualized or individuating themselves by their own ability to find a new paradigm for themselves based on what they've learned about whatever the particular situation is. So there would be people that would say identify with this thing, this concept, but not identify with that label. Like there might be people who are in favor of, let's say, for example, controversial topics. Abortion's controversial, so I'm against that, but I'm not really for mass incarceration. We'd have more of maybe like in the middle, people thinking for themselves.
Get into the story though, make sure that you like this video, subscribe to the comment section channel if you have not already, and of course, ring that notification bell so that you never miss one of our episodes. All right, so this whole story starts with Trump's new VP pick.
Make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe, share it with your family members. If you want, give me a super thanks. Check out some of my other videos, and on with the show.
JD Vance. He was announced this week at the RNC, which is happening in Milwaukee. He officially accepted his appointment to...
So I actually, truthfully, and I'm not just saying this to be shy because I don't want to polarize people, I really don't care.
VP during his speech last night, and I am just a huge fan of his. I have liked him for years.
I'm not a fan whatsoever, but it doesn't really matter.
Smart. I love that he is young, that he looks like somebody who would know how to open a PDF, anything like that. Thank God, it's fantastic. This man is a...
Yeah, I think he probably knows a lot about basic internet skills, probably knows what Bitcoin is. He, like a lot of things that probably most of the population that's gonna live over the next 40 years, I think he has some concept about that. The only issue is that how does this really relate to Lord of the Rings? I'm not seeing that. I'm waiting for that, but I don't see that. And I'm just reacting to this. I didn't watch this before. I'm not doing any major edits.
He has served our country. He knows his way around DC and politics, but he's also a very successful businessman. And on top of that, he is a...
Okay, that's nice. I'm not going to even really... I'm really very tempted to really talk about stuff that I don't usually talk about in my videos. I'm not really going to do that. I'm still just waiting for her to get back around to the main topic. I get it, her commitment. She's conservative. No worries. She likes JD Vance. No worries. but still, where does this exactly tie in with the fandom? I haven't the foggiest idea.
Normal guy. Some of you might not know his story, might have just been introduced to him, but J.D. Vance literally came from nothing. And you can read about all of this and more in his book that he wrote called The
Okay.
Hillbilly Elegy, which was later turned into a wildly successful movie. It is on Netflix. Everyone should watch. I actually think that it is up 1,000%.
What the hell are you talking about?
Since his announcement, which is just so cool. And side note, I just personally love the fact that much like Trump, before JD opened his mouth and ran for office,
Tell me what's
Hollywood loved him. They loved his book. They made it into a movie with huge stars in it. And then, oh no,
Tell me what's
came out as a Republican. And I'm sure that that sent them all into an emotional crisis, which personally makes me very happy.
I don't understand. Understanding of the premise of the video was that somehow being a Lord of the Rings fan, that makes you far right. But I don't know. I'm 3 minutes in, 4 minutes into the video, and I haven't really seen the connection or heard the sound bites that really tie this to why I wanted to do a reaction to this video in the first place. So once again, it doesn't bother me one way or the other if you're way on the left, in the middle, you're a little bit to the left, you're a little bit to the right. That's not the point of this video. Really, my point was trying to really get to the core, which is something I've spoken about continually, about putting these judgment calls on millions and millions of people who are invariably quite different and don't really share the same ideology. I don't get it.
It's a funny thought. The point, he is Trump's VP pick, and the mainstream media is flailing. They are desperate to try and find problems with him and villainize him. But
Okay, it's election year, par for the course. I'm still not seeing the connection to LOTR whatsoever.
it's not going too well, considering that this is all Rachel Maddow had to say.
Like Mr. Teal, who has named his companies after things in the Lord of the Rings series of J.R.R. Tolkien books. Lord of the Rings is a sort of favorite cosmos for naming things and cultural references for a lot of far-right and alt-right figures.
Okay, now she's just making stuff up. And how do I know that she's making stuff up? Because, like, categorically, the people who, for example, introduced me to Tolkien did not fit that demographic whatsoever. And those people were my folks. And they don't fit that demographic whatsoever.
Both in Europe and the United States, like his mentor, like Peter Thiel, who had given him all his jobs in the world. Mr. Vance also, when he founded his own venture capital firm with help from Peter Thiel, named it after a Lord of the Rings thing. He called it Narya, N-A-R-Y-A.
Okay, so he named his company after the Ring of Fire. Okay.
Which you can remember because it's Aryan, but you move the end to the front. Apparently that word has...
So I don't know who her writers are, but her writers do not do good research. And I'm not saying that to clown her. Her writers didn't do good research because the talking points she just said, not good talking points. If you want to really discuss the quote-unquote true Aryans, of course, then the true Aryans were a tribe of people coming from Asia, and they originally invaded what is now known as India.
Something to do with elves and rings from the Lord of the Rings series. I don't know.
Yeah.
So you don't know, but she said a bunch of ish that really, I don't know if you really should have said, because the ish that came out of your mouth is based on supposition, and you're kind of like intimating something. You're intimating based on your feeling about one particular political figure. You're intimating that people that like Tolkien think a certain way and are a certain way. Not a good call. Not great research. Terrible call.
Goodness, you're here.
Thank goodness you're here.
You don't know, because it's literally just a word from Lord of the Rings. That is not some political dog whistle. Rachel Maddow.
Okay, I completely agree with the kid here. I agree with Brett in terms of this particular point.
Oh, no. I mean, seriously. This is all you've got? This is what you're spending time talking about at the RNC? Come on, like you think that...
I'm not sure why our writers didn't do more research. I'm really not. I don't understand.
This is some sort of dunk on J.D. Vance? That he got to start with one of the most brilliant, most famous, and well-renowned businessmen of this generation, Peter Thiel, that he named his very successful venture capital fund after something in Lord of the Rings?
So I'm not going to even really get deep into like J.D. Vance because I don't really want to, or Peter Thiel. Also don't want to, not really my point here. But my point being that this has nothing to do with the fandom. And this is just like another example of, in this instance, it has to do with what they do in the political realm. But as we've seen for some reason over the last 3 years, that they kind of like dump in a group of people that like a particular author and derivative works and then kind of like make stuff up.
Oh no, I'm so scared. This is so appalling. Find something better to talk about. Like, how is that a right-wing symbol or even a problem?
Of course, if we look more specifically, Narya is one of the 3 rings that was untouched by Sauron. So it wouldn't have any connection to anything negative. Therefore, it would have no connection to anything political.
And then to throw that line in there about it being Aryan in reverse, like, are you trying to assert that he intentionally did that as some kind of racist alt-right dog whistle? It makes no sense.
I mean, all it proves to me is that Maddow's particular writers at the time of her actual show now, I guess, and this was recently, that they're not very well educated. Unfortunately, that's the nicest thing I could say. And then to be honest, like, being well educated is really not an excuse. And why do I say it's not an excuse? Because you can just look it up. You can look it up.
Fool of a took. Throw yourself in next time and rid us of your stupidity.
Great scene, great actors.
Maybe he just likes the books. Maybe he just likes the fact that Narya, which is apparently one of the 3 rings of power, is described as having the power to inspire others to resist tyranny, domination, and despair.
Okay, fair enough. I actually addressed that the first time it was mentioned.
I mean, this is just me, but I'd say that that is a pretty sick name for a very based VC fund if I have ever heard one. But no, instead you had to make it about the word Aryan and that was somehow a problem.
This video is pretty much like clickbait. Most of the video has nothing to do with the Lord of the Rings.
And also that it was a problem that he got to start with Peter Thiel, who again is a brilliant man. Like, that is something that is very cool that people should be excited about. Thankfully, the comment...
Yeah, whether you like Peter Thiel or you don't like Peter Thiel, or whether you like Vance or you don't like Vance, neither one of these guys created the Lord of the Rings. Neither one of these guys created The Hobbit. Neither one of these guys created any of the stuff that really is being considered that it's far right. So you can be far right and like Tolkien. You can be far left and like Tolkien. Of course, Narya and the other 2 rings of power were bound to the one ring because Celebrimbor used Sauron's craft. So just a quick postscript. You also could be completely like not interested in politics whatsoever and be interested in Tolkien, which probably a high percentage of Tolkien fans are not interested in politics whatsoever. Why? Because they think for themselves and they don't really buy into a lot of the agendas that are being sold them either on the left or the right or even the center.
Have not disappointed whatsoever. One guy said, so when Hollywood funded and produced the Lord of the Ring movies, they were suddenly all alt-right? They were all...
No, they weren't, but I think there is a good point to be made there that when they created or when they allowed these films to be green lighted, it was before I think that we really jumped the shark in society. So now we've completely jumped the shark, especially over like the last 8 to 10 years. I don't know to that extent if you could create you couldn't create those movies again in this particular time period. Now, some people will probably challenge me on that because there are new Jackson movies in the works and there's plenty of new Tolkien fare, but I really don't think they're going to beat the LTR trilogy. I doubt it.
Harry getting involved in alt-right propaganda, the cosmos of Lord of the Rings, whatever she said. Another guy said, Lord of the Rings is very diverse and is just a work of fantasy.
Okay, so whoever answered that and wrote that comment sounds like someone who actually is a fan.
Just like Rachel Maddow's career. And then Megyn Kelly jumped in and said, I'm just now realizing that my husband and every man I know is alt-right.
I think potentially they are, but once again, that doesn't mean anything. You have people of all shapes and sizes who enjoy Professor Tolkien's work.
You do believe, then, that there can be a state of absolute good from which most people do fall?
It said, for instance, there's no religion in the book. There isn't, for reasons which are partly aesthetic, partly auctorial, and partly the history. This book, so-called Lord of the Rings, comes at the end of a long series of stories I've created in which the situation would be explained. Why there were no, for instance, churches, rituals, and temples, and so on.
Yes, I mean, is it lost on people that readers and audiences from all different backgrounds, all races, creeds, ages, and political affiliations can appreciate the same piece of art?
This, that's 100%, like we often say on the internet, 100.
And simultaneously interpret it differently, and the fact that that is fine, like that is what makes classic literature.
Yeah, generally, like if you write for everybody. I don't really think that you just write because you just want people in your echo chamber to enjoy your work. I think most people, they're really like writing with the idea of at least having thousands of people, if not hundreds of thousands of people, read their work. Yeah.
Because it has stood the test of time because of the diversity and the wide scope of the readers who find solace and connection within its pages. Like that is what makes it so amazing.
All of that is true, but it's also that I think we're on the third or fourth generation in which like people literally give their kids The Hobbit because literally it was designed as a children's book.
If somebody on the political right likes Lord of the Rings, that does not make Lord of the Rings bad. It does not make that person bad. It just means they're enjoying a piece of art. It is.
Yeah, I mean, the work of art is not really colored by the reader's politics in any way.
Not inherently bad or dangerous or even worth pointing out, to be honest, if the people you dislike also enjoy a very popular.
Yeah, I don't have too much disagreement with this. I agree with most of what's said right here.
I mean, that should not be controversial. Like, what kind of dream world are you living in where it is controversial? Not my dream.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, we've totally jumped the shark. So a lot of things are controversial that were just sort of common sense. And then really, a lot of times, just being a critical thinker, people easily assume that you're one way or the other. Thinking for yourself is kind of dangerous for some strange reason.
About Middle Earth, which again is much better than whatever dream world the libs are living in. Anyway, these dangerous alt-writers have
Yes and no, and truthfully, I don't care.
been enjoying the wrong pieces of art for far too long. Specifically, they have been enjoying Lord of the Rings, and the media is not happy. Back in February of last
year. If you're writing for any show of any stature on either side of the political aisle, and you really don't know about Tolkien, then you really shouldn't do an article about Tolkien. It's so bad.
It came out that one of the UK's counter-terrorism teams had compiled a list of dangerous authors and books that could signal that somebody had extreme right-wing views. Just here.
I will say something. If you enjoy Professor Tolkien's work, you're probably likely to potentially be open to critical thinking and thinking for yourself. So I would say that would probably be a trait of individuals in the Tolkien fan base that is probably higher than other fan bases. And I'm just isolating it. But the ability to think critically, I think is probably higher because it has to be very, very high to even really appreciate Professor Tolkien's work.
That again. A counterterrorism group put together a list of books to signal whether somebody could possibly be alt-right, a terrorist. You might be thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be insane books, weird fringe. Lord of the Rings was on the list.
So would a book that really clearly states what is right and would authorities in diverse countries find this threatening? Yes, I believe they would.
This is from Daily Caller. Reading Lord of the Rings in 1984 could lead to right-wing extremism, government report warned.
What's going to happen if you read those two books? Like, if you read those two books, or in this case, probably 4 books, if you really want to get technical, what would happen is that you would probably think for yourself and prioritize good over evil, which probably you should prioritize good over evil, right?
Now, author Douglas Murray, who is just brilliant, you guys should read his books, he was the first to report on this list back in 2023, and he found that in addition to one of his books, classic authors such as
Yeah, no comment on Douglas Murray for this video whatsoever.
C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, George Orwell, Joseph Conrad, and Aldous Huxley were included on the list of potentially problematic text compiled by Prevent Research's Information and Communications Unit. Other authors.
The real problem is if you're reading any of those books mentioned, you're thinking for yourself. That's the problem.
Whose work is allegedly shared by people sympathetic with the far right and Brexit also reportedly included Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Edmund Burke, Thomas Carlyle, Adam Smith, and William Shakespeare.
So once again, if you're deemed intelligent and you're deemed that you think for yourself, yes, in 2024, this is a problem. Now, I'm going to go further than the person in the video is. There really is no left and there really is no right. I'm not going to elucidate or explain that. But what I will say that does really relate to the whole idea of Tolkien is that if you're thinking for yourself, we're now in times where that's a no-go for some strange reason.
I mean, guys, you literally cannot make this stuff up. Shakespeare? What did Shakespeare do? Literally, what is the problem? Come on, John Locke, Edmund Burke, 2 of the most influential, famous philosophers of all time. They're suddenly problematic because they wrote about the Enlightenment hundreds of years ago, that they helped usher in classical.
A lot of times what they really want you to do is they want you just to consume. They don't really want you to think, because if you really sort of like think, then you challenge a lot of the things that are going on. If you really started to think and you were able to really connect with, wait a second, like I'm more committed to prosperity, for example, wait a second, this particular show, it really doesn't connect to me. It really has nothing to do with me. I don't know why they have these different kinds of characters doing really crazy things. Or for example, why there's all this focus on darkness in this show that's really based on Tolkien, where there was a lot of light. If I wanted to see a show about darkness, I would have seen a horror movie, or I would have seen something about a serial killer, but I'm not really interested in that. I'm interested in this thing over here. I'm interested in this thing, which is morality play. I'm really interested in thinking. I'm really, for example, hearkening back to Socrates, looking for the good. I'm interested in these kinds of concepts. I'm not just interested in gross darkness. Maybe some people are interested in that, but they're not really watching what I'm watching, listening to what I'm listening to. Now, when I say what I just said now, there are people of all persuasions that keys and that connects to them. But whether they connect to that on one level or another, that doesn't color the actual literature itself.
Liberalism? I mean, guys, it is just absurd. But sadly, or actually for our benefit because we get to laugh about it, it did not end with just that list. Journalists also blamed Lord of the Rings for enabling and inspiring the rise of Italy's far right. Here's an article about that, how the Lord of the Rings became a symbol for Italy's far right. Fascists have twisted Tolkien into Lord of the right wing.
So whenever people say things like that, you have to wonder if they really are actually that well read, or at the bare minimum have really done research. Because to say some of the things that they say, especially some of the things that have come up in this piece that I'm reacting to, you wonder, because it almost seems like they don't care to do research. and you know that the same people on a different topic would do more research. Just is crazy.
Okay, so why is that? Well, my friends, it is because the right-wing Prime Minister of Italy has loved Lord of the Rings since she was a child. She loves the books. And because of that, it is now a symbol of Italy's far right. This article from the...
All that means is that her parents were well read. That's all that means. That's all it means. It doesn't mean anything else. If, you know, like, for example, if both of her parents were far left, I mean, the conversation can be made for both sides. It's just silly. And I'm using this particular like piece to talk about it, but really it's completely apolitical. And if anything, it probably has more kind of like theological connotations.
Times wrote, Giorgia Meloni, Italy's prime minister, has been painted by many of her detractors as a member of the far right. These days, she has toned down the rhetoric, insisting that fascism is a chapter long closed in Italy. Her political ideology, she says, can be defined more clearly by reading The Lord of the Rings. That's all. The article goes on and says, as a teenager, Meloni attended at least one of the latter Campo Hobbit festivals.
So how could one take a story that actually, if we really just look at face value, probably decries the evil of war, period, and spin it? The spin is crazy.
Held in the 1990s. When she was elected last year, her sister Ariana likened the pair of them to Frodo and Samwise Gamgee, the Hobbit heroes. In her 2021 autobiography, she described Tolkien's book as a sacred text. Oh no, I'm clutching my pearls that somebody could have been inspired by a...
So for example, if you're inspired, that means, I mean, it doesn't mean anything. I mean, to me, it just is just like it's at this point, like it's more than just the closing of the quote unquote American mind, just the shutdown, or like people not really linking. I mean, it leaves me kind of speechless.
Classic piece of literature. Literally, that is laughable, guys. That is a serious piece of journalism. They are actually arguing that because she has liked Lord of the Rings since she was a child, that because she and her sister likened themselves to Frodo and Samwise, that it has inspired the fascist uprising in Italy.
Keep your full tongue behind your teeth.
Calm down.
Yeah, I'm not really clear if that is really what one is to glean from Tolkien's work. I mean, to really liken it. No, so for example, this particular Italian leader taking inspiration from that's something personal. And the fact that she's associated with, quote unquote, the far right in her country, whether the far right's good or the far right's bad, doesn't really color the classic piece of literature that she's invoking. It doesn't color it in one way, shape, or form.
I mean, Marxists literally love Lord of the Rings too, and guess what? That's fine. Here's an article about that, a Marxist view of Tolkien's Middle-earth. That's from the Jacobian. Stephen Colbert, who I'm sure Rachel Maddow loves, is famously obsessed with Lord of the Rings, and he is about as far from the far right as you can get.
But I'm just guessing that if you were into Dungeons & Dragons, you must have been into Lord of the Rings.
Yes, I was. I will just say this to you, Conan. Ellen Silla Lumen Omentielvo. Or don't you speak Quenya?
And that's normal. That's normal for somebody who's read a bunch of books to be like, yeah, one of the real things that I was into, potentially like someone well-read, possibly a nerd when they were younger, like, yeah, I love Lord of the Rings. It's not crazy.
No one speaks High Elvish in this room? These are not my people.
Yes, that's correct. If you, like most of the articles, what they should be saying is that when I think of the Lord of the Rings, I think of a bunch of nerds playing D&D. That's what they should say. If anything, that's what they should say. If they're attributing that to potentially like some nerds who are now far right, or some nerds who are now in the center, or some nerds, whatever, because, you know, people grow up, have their political opinions, which is really like a game that older adults especially love indulging in. Yeah,
I mean, I can't even believe that I have to say this, but this is the English major in me coming out. Good literature is supposed to speak to everyone. It is supposed to draw you in and give you the chance to experience a world unlike your own.
This is true. So, for example, like a true story, I can remember in philosophy class, I think I did a paper where I tied like Socrates with Malcolm X. I think I did like my final on that, and I got an A, and I tied both of them, you know, and there was no, and I had like all these different logical arguments that I had. I mean, and that's what I chose to do, and I used logic, and I showed that how a lot of the things that, for example, Malcolm said, especially before he passed, or rather was assassinated, that these are just logical things. You know, no man has believed perfectly until he wishes for his brother what he wishes for himself. Is something that Dr. Shawarbi said to Malcolm X before he did his Hajj.
And relate to new characters. And guess what? You do that as an individual based on your own individual experiences and individual values.
Yeah, that's what I just said. That's why I use the non-Tolkien reference. You take whatever you have in your mind and you bring it, and you can connect that to the literature in of itself. So, for example, a lot of times with the advent of some of the newer derivatives, case in point, the Rings of Power, some people have said that the truth is there already was racial distinction in Tolkien's world, because, for example, the dwarves and the elves are completely different races, and they're different from the men. They're a different race.
And that will change how you interpret the book, and that's fine. For example, a lot of people on the right love 1984. They love Brave New World, and they see those dystopian novels as warning signs and very timely for the world that we're living in. But guess what?
I think one of the only problems is that people who love 1984 or people who love Brave New World now in 2024, they're classified as being on the right if you love those books, or if you see that they're a warning sign. But actually, if you really love those books, you would be completely an independent thinker. Completely independent thinker. And would probably be more kind of prone to be like, I don't know if I believe the government about many things. And I'm not telling you what to believe, but I'm saying, like, if you're really talking about your batching all this stuff together, I don't know if that would really have you believing in the state at all.
So do people on the left. They read those books and they think about Trump because of their Trump derangement syndrome, and they get all scared. And you know what? Again, they are allowed to. That's okay. They are allowed to interpret literature differently. And that does not mean that the literature itself is bad or that they are corrupting it. It just means that they are a different type of person with a different background.
So really, I think, to really elucidate the most important opinion that I'll give, and I've given a lot of them, but I think if you're really a quote-unquote pure Tolkienist or ringer or whatever you want to call yourself, then you're going to think for yourself. You're going to think for yourself. You're going to have your own political inclinations. But hopefully what you'll find in having read any of Tolkien's stuff or enjoyed it in any way, that you're able to really see, like, I don't know if war is really good. What does war do? For example, did war really destroy the Shire? Like in the movies, for example, Jackson's movies, what happened when they came back to the Shire? The Shire was fine? The Shire was unsullied by war? No, not really.
It is inspiring how they are reading the book. That's just how being subjective works. J.D. Vance, loving Lord of the Rings so much that he named his business after part of the book, does not make him bad, and it does not make Lord of the Rings bad.
It also doesn't make him good. If we go back to one of the things in the beginning of the video, one of the quotes from Tolkien was that he doesn't believe in the absolutes, especially when it comes to people.
It does not make him a racist, and no, it is not some alt-right dog whistle. It is just a man enjoying a piece of literature. So please, God, find something better to talk about, MSNBC.
by The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit?
I shouldn't have thought there's very much choice in. If I remember at all, it'd be by The Lord of the Rings, I'd take it.
So if you made it this far, give me a like, subscribe, share with your fam. It's been my pleasure going through these different bits and bobs, and I'll endeavor to do these periodically, maybe once a month, and I'm out.